Hello, Kaya. Welcome to a sneaky extra Michelle from Perth video. There's no costume, it's just me, and it's the WA state election on Saturday, so I wanted to talk about voting. What we're voting for, how it works, and what you can do before election day to make your vote count. But before we talk politics, I want to talk politics. I've been thinking pretty seriously about how to approach this video. I want Michelle from Perth to be more about inspiring curiosity than telling you my opinions, but this time encouraging you to make your own decisions about who to vote for comes into pretty direct conflict with party stances on science-backed topics like vaccination and renewable energy. So I've decided to just tell you I'll be voting Greens. I'm not saying you should vote Greens necessarily, but I think it would be against my values and against the values of this dumb YouTube show to take a kind of hands-off devil's advocate approach to some of the cooked minor parties out there. So that's that, let's get into it. First, what are we voting for? What is the WA state government? I get the feeling that lots of people are psyched to vote for Daddy Mark McGowan, but obviously that's not exactly how things work, so let me explain. The WA State Parliament runs on a bicameral model, meaning similar to the federal government, we have two houses, the Legislative Assembly, or the lower house, and the Legislative Council, or upper house. We're voting to elect everyone, which means one member of Parliament for each of the 59 districts of the Assembly, and 6 MPs for the 6 regions of the Council. The Assembly is where government is formed, around the party with the majority of seats, which is currently WA Labor with 40 of the 59, whereas the Council is more of a chamber of review that often isn't held by the ruling party. MPs across the two houses do things like make laws, scrutinise government legislation, administration and expenditure, and communicate about issues. They represent their constituents, the people in the district they were elected to serve, and they will usually belong to a political party whose policies and values will guide their actions. So what about Marky? Well, he's the leader of the WA Labor Party. He is also the member for Rockingham, one of the 59 districts of the Legislative Assembly, so unless you live in Rockingham, his name won't be on your ballot. So let's move on. It's election day. You rock up at a polling place and you get given 2 ballot papers. The small one is for the Assembly and the big one is for the Council. You're voting to elect the Assembly member for your district and 6 Council members for your region. First, the small sheet. You have to number all the boxes in order of preference with your first choice as number 1. From there, the winner is decided using a system called full preferential instant runoff voting. For this, a candidate needs a majority of over 50% of the votes to win. To start with, everyone's first choice is tallied. If no candidate gets a majority, the candidate with the least votes is eliminated and their votes are distributed among the other candidates according to the second preferences of those voters. This way, even if your preferred candidate doesn't win, your vote is still counted, flowing down through the candidates in the order that you've nominated. For the Legislative Council ballot, the big bit of paper, it works slightly differently. Because you're voting to fill 6 seats, each candidate needs to reach a quota instead of an overall majority. The way the votes are counted is called proportional representation, and it's a similar process of eliminating candidates and redistributing votes until 6 candidates meet the quota. For this sheet, you can either vote above or below the line. Above the line is a bit simpler. It just involves putting a 1, a tick or a cross next to the party or candidate of your choosing. This means your vote will flow according to their preferences instead of you filling out your own. If you choose to vote below the line, called a candidate preference vote, you're in charge of all your preferences and you have to number every box. Here's where I'm going to say this can be a little confusing. You might think that, hey, my favourite candidate isn't going to win, so since I don't mind Labor but I hate the Libs, just an example, I'll just put Labor first. But actually, there's a good reason to put your real first preference first. When a party gets more than 4% of the vote, they get reimbursed for money they've spent on the campaign. Currently, parties can get just under $2 back for every first preference vote they receive. So even if you're in a strong Labor seat, putting Greens first, just an example, can make a real difference. And if you've numbered all the boxes correctly, you can be confident that your vote will count where it's needed. It's also important to note, if you're wanting to vote for someone other than a major party, that although they might not get a chance in the Assembly, where only the most popular candidate gets a seat, choosing 6 candidates per region for the Council means that minor parties have a much better chance at representation. Now to maybe the most important question: how do you decide who to vote for? This is obviously a very important part of voting, and it's a good idea to do a little bit of homework and look up the candidates beforehand. Even if you know where you stand with regards to the major parties, the reason I'm so keen on this is a bunch of smaller parties with kind of misleading names. Think about this. You're looking at your ballot paper. You've put your faves on top and some certain horrible racists on the bottom. But now you have to choose an order for the middle. You see the Sustainable Australia Party. Okay, you think I like sustainability, but you might not like their stance on cutting immigration quotas to avoid overpopulation. There's the Great Australian Party. Sounds dope, but they're a bunch of populist conspiracy theorists who think the Constitution is fake. You put the No Mandatory Vaccinations Party very low on the list because they're definitely anti-vaxxers, but then you see the Health Australia Party. Sounds nice, they're anti-vaxxers too. There's Liberals for Climate, who are actually just the Flux Party in disguise. They want to techno-hack democracy and they have no climate policy to speak of. Then there's the Liberal Democrats, who are pro-guns, pro-smoking and pro-uranium mining. Then there's things like the Daylight Savings Party and the Legalise Cannabis Western Australia Party, who are each exactly and only about the niche issue the names promise. I'd say this has been more of a bit than a real nuanced voting guide, so please just look it up yourself. The ABC has a good summary of all the parties and the Electoral Commission website is always a good resource. Okay, that's it from me. Remember to vote on Saturday or beforehand at an early polling centre, and I hope you enjoy your democracy sausage.